In this video, I'm going to break down 2 of my new remixes. It'll be a brief overview of both tracks, how I made them, but it'll also have some cool tips and tricks of things that I did to create these complex layers in the bass lines, drums, leads, and the effects. You can download a condensed version of this project file with the samples, presets, and the stems from the original track. Thanks to the owner of the label Inspired by Trees, who's allowed me to share these stems with you, who is actually the original artist of this remix, named Paige. We're going to jump in. Before we do, make sure to like, subscribe. If you want to support the channel and support me, you can click the link in the description below to my Patreon, or you can purchase either of these tracks to help support me and the labels that I've released on. I'm hosting a remix competition with the owner of the label Inspired by Trees, who is also the original track on this track that I remixed. So if you want to compete in this remix competition or just grab the stems for the original track, click the link in the description below for more information on how to join. And if you just want to grab a condensed version of this project file, including the stems, some of the samples and presets, then you can also grab that in the link in the description below or up in the card right here. This is the first track. It's by Paige and it's called Jantelegen, and it's my remix on Inspired by Trees. This is the main loop. Starting off with the kick, it's a pretty big bassy sounding kick, but I've cut it down pretty short. Otherwise it was too long. And it had that little click at the end. Some basic EQ cutting off the top because I felt it was a little bit too bright, adding in a couple layers to replace that top. This overdrive is really good for adding a little bit of color to the kick. Just very, very slight. I love using overdrives on kick drums. I think they always just bring up a little bit of nice color and punch through the mix a little bit. That's it for the kick. Let's move on to the bass. And with this bass, I have a lot of different layers. It's a little bit complicated as usual for my style of music that I like to make, but I'm going to show you each of the individual layers and how they play well together. So the sub here is actually just one signal sound that is playing in the loop. It's just a simple patch. The second layer of bass also has a lot of sub frequencies. This is my main sub here. It also has a lot of mid frequencies and top end that I'm cutting out with some EQ, lots of EQing and some compression going on, taking the low end down a little bit. I also have a delay, and sometimes delay can cause stereo imaging problems, especially if it's not in mono. So I've monoed here up in the bass group. So I'm pulling out anything that's in stereo below about 200, 250 hertz. I'm missing this infinity bass because I'm on my other computer, but this is actually a nice kind of like low end enhancement tool. And going back to the patch here, let's go into Serum. And this is a preset that I chose and manipulated. This bass preset I grabbed from a sample pack, and I can take the EQ off. I have some sidechain compression from the kick drum coming in, so you hear a bit of that swelling. And I grab a lot of my bass sounds from preset packs. I make a few of my own, but then I also will grab presets from packs and then adjust them to how I think it fits in the track. Otherwise, it's a really good idea just to write a bass line and then cycle through some different presets. When you cycle through the different presets, you get different ideas that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before. So like, I'll just duplicate this over and we can try some different sounds really quickly. That's cool. Let's go into this pack here. I have a Bound to Divide pack. I'll put a link to it in the description below. I know a lot of people always ask me for which sample packs I like to use and preset packs. Bound to Divide's bass lab volumes are really, really nice. So I'll go through a few of those right now, and you can find a link to that in the description below. This is a very low bass. You're getting a lot of low tones here. Let me try pushing this up an octave, and we'll see how it sounds. So what I like to do is I test that with the rest of my tracks, see how it sounds with the bass line, and just dial in some different presets, see what fits best, and then I will use that. Next layer of bass is this really cool thing that I like to do where I put an auto filter on a band pass. And in that band pass, I have the LFO moving back and forth. So if I solo this, I can turn off the flanger and the delay. This is basically going back and forth. A bandpass filter scooping back and forth, and it sounds really cool. Add a little bit of flanger, delay. That's on just the top end of the bass, and then this is the rest of the bass here. Just adding a little bit of mid frequencies to that. Let's listen to both together. That layer just gives a lot of complexity to the bass line. It makes it sound really interesting, and it's very simple to do. Just use a bandpass filter with some LFO movement on it. Very simple and very effective. Next, I have my bass stabs. So these are all resampled, and I will show you a really cool trick here. So what I like to do is I'll take something like this interesting sound. I will record it, and then I will mess around with the sampling of the recording. And this is really effective because you can dial in a bunch of weird settings, record for a while, and then grab parts of the audio that you liked. So this one I grabbed just a simple, nothing crazy, but it's groovy. If I play that with the kick, and the next one, this one's a bit lower. I've actually probably just lowered the pitch here. So I've lowered the pitch on this one. So I've recorded it up here. Sounds like this. And I've lowered the pitch. And it gives me a little bit more of a different sound. And take the EQ off. With the EQ back on. Again, using a bandpass filter to make this a little bit more of like a resonant sound. And layer that back up with the whole bass line. Doing this a few times gives you a very complex bass line. It makes your bass lines feel much more interesting, much more professional. It's going to help you get signed to the bigger labels that cater to this type of music. Thinking of like Mango Alley is a great example of this. Their bass lines are very complex, and this is a really good way of doing that. I have some more tops here. Again, I go a little bit crazy with the different layers, but that's kind of where my music is now. This one actually is from the original. This is from the remix. This is the original bass line, and it doesn't sound anything like this. What I actually did is I shrunk this by holding shift, make sure that the warp is on, hold shift, and I can move this over. Now I look back. Sounds a lot more like it. I'll turn this EQ off, and if I were to pull this out, we would actually have that same bass line. So now I have that bass line. I'm now going to go back, stretch it out. Made that sound much deeper and longer, and it fills up more of the space. Lastly, I have this bass sound here. This is from the original track as well, I believe. And I've just taken sections of the stems that he's given me, and I've cut them up to add again to the bass layer. And then I have this little effect here. Just changing around, again, parts of these recordings, changing the pitch of them, EQing them, and adding things like delays and reverbs to make these little detailed sounds in the background. So one more time, we'll listen to the bass with the kick drum. We'll move on to the drums. One more thing, the most important thing first to do before adding all these complex layers is have a solid groove first. Make sure your bass line is strong, it's groovy, it's powerful, and it matches the vibe of the energy of the track before moving on to adding these complex layers. Otherwise, you're going to make it convoluted. It's going to be very difficult and confusing, and you're going to lose your momentum in your groove. So make the groove first. Any layers you add on top of that, if they're not adding groove, if they're pulling away from the groove, then change them. The drums are pretty simple. I'll go over a couple layers, but I cover drums in a lot of my other videos, so definitely don't need to spend too much time on these. What I will say is that I've taken some of these percussive loops and I've added in this EQ. With these percussion loops, I just have some heavy EQ going on. I really like EQing a lot as part of my sound design. I like to really use a lot of filtering to grab the character of the sound that I want and really shape it to fit in the style of my track. Sometimes you can get really cool sounds by just filtering everything but a small section. This is part of the original. I've just added some EQ and some delay. And then I've taken a second layer and lowered the pitch, but I actually took that out. I'll leave it in for the project file, but I didn't use it in the actual song. And that's basically it for the drums. Nothing too crazy. Let's listen to the kick, bass, and drums all together now. Up next, I have the synths, and this is going to consist of the original track stems, as well as some of the things that I put in there. Some atmospheres I grabbed from the original, and then I just took sections of them again, just taking these different sections and spicing them up, grabbing them, cutting them at weird places, and creating kind of like melodies with the different vibe of the melodic structure of the original stems. I increase the delay feedback as it's building, and that's going to add to the tension. Right, that super high feedback keeps it playing. Sounds really cool. Some more atmospheres down here. I don't need to go over all of them, but I will just quickly. Very simple. You can get packs like this out of different atmosphere packs, sample packs. I have one on my Patreon, guitar sample packs of these these pad sounds I made using a guitar and reverb. So that's on my Patreon if you want to check that out. And then I have some other layers here. This is a bassline accent. Just something very simple. Probably should have kept that in the bassline section, but I had enough up there. This is a really cool effect that I heard, and he sent me a long stem of a bunch of different effects, and this one sounded really cool. So I took this and I pitched it down. That was the original. It's like a rattle. I pitched it down so it's nice and gritty, and then I made that part of the final drop and added it as part of like the percussion and groove. I think sounds really cool. I love doing stuff like that, grabbing different effects or percussions and using them in a weird way in the drops, because it adds that extra little percussive groove, but it's unique and it really elevates the track in my opinion. Both lead sounds came from the original track. They are very bright sounding, more atmospheric. I put a lot of reverb and delay on them. And on this one, I lowered the pitch, so it really fills it out. It makes it very unique sounding. Again, just really working with resampling, stretching things out, making them sound like there's two layers and they're the same layer. They're both really atmospheric, so I doubled it up, changed the pitch, and then changed the positioning of it. So both are playing a different kind of register of sounds, even though they're the same in a different octave, they're playing differently, and it's creating this huge movement of sounds. And it's a really easy trick to do to add a lot of movement to the atmospheres. Lastly, I have a couple different sounds here. This cool atmospheric sound I made in Serum, and then I used a delay to make these. This is like a signature thing that I do. I don't even know if I should tell you, but I'm gonna tell you. It basically moves the different delays around. With the delay, it changes the pitch. And it makes these cool pitch drops and pitch, like playful pitch noises, and it sounds really cool. And I do that in a few of my tracks. It's kind of one of my signature things, but you know, if you're watching this video, you deserve to know, okay? Two more sounds here. Same thing with the delay, just adding, this is throughout the whole track, and it's a way to add movement and atmosphere. And then I have some effects down here below. Nothing too special, just impact, snare roll. Different big reverb sounds with lots of reverb on the setting. 15 seconds. Right, typical impact. So like I said, you can download a condensed version of this project file. Most of the stuff that's included in here, and I will put that on my Patreon, so you can click the link in the description below or in the card, whichever side it's gonna be on, and let's jump into the next track. The second remix I have for you is by Austin Leeds and Danko Skystone, and it's my remix of Call of the Sirens, which is available on Mystique Music. Again, if you wanna grab these tracks, links are in the description below. Kick drum, just basic EQ, compression, all that fun stuff. We're not gonna worry about it. Sounds like this. The kick comes from one of my sample packs on my Patreon. First, we'll take a listen to the bass. The kick. Lots of layers in my bass, again, as usual. Let's go into the main processing here. I have some track spacer for the kick drum for some side chain. We have some mid-side EQ, so pulling out the sides of the image below, say 200. And then I have some EQ just cutting out a little bit of the muddiness of that high end. It was just a bit too buzzy. Just punching a little bit too much, so I scooped that out. Some multiband dynamics, but I've turned that off. And let's go into the first layer. This is from the original stem. The reason I have it frozen is a really cool thing that I like to do, and that is to freeze in a place that adds rhythm. So if you listen to it, it has this kind of movement and this like wafting sound. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to unfreeze the duplicated sound because I don't want to lose it. And if I play this now, hear how it's different? And if I stop it and play it again, every time I stop it and play it again, it's going to start at a new position because I have this LFO running on a rate. So it's playing at a speed that's not locked into the BPM. And because of this, it's creating these different rhythms. And so I've taken this LFO, I've adjusted it to the frequency on this EQ, and this is what the original stem from the original track sounded like. I'll turn all my processing off here. So then when I put on this delay track spacer, I'll turn this off for now, and this EQ. The second EQ is adding that nice movement, the LFO. And I just designed my own kind of bass stab out of this using that LFO to add that movement and that swing. And it just makes it on such a higher level of complexity, and it's very simple to do. So why I froze that is because I kept listening and I found a spot that I liked, and then I froze it. So I played it until I found a rhythm that I liked with my kick. Say I like that one, and then I freeze. And that's going to freeze the whole track with that LFO where you like it. And of course I can change the depth of this. Want a little bit of movement or a lot, and just make these really cool characteristic sounds. Pretty cool, right? So an easy way to level up your synths and level up your bass lines by adding some movement like this. I have this serum layer, a very strong, like robotic sound, so I EQ'd a lot of it out of there. Lead sound preset that I grabbed, then just basically an EQ, really scooping. Like I said, I use EQ to make sounds fit a lot differently, and I'm using a lot of EQ there to make it less of a strong sound and more of a buzz. This one I got by actually using this sub frequency. I took this bass preset, I opened up the cutoff. Sounds really badass, and then I can record that in this audio here. So I can record, I can choose what I want to record, so we're going to choose sub. I hit record, and I hit record. And now I have this recording here. And now I can manipulate this how I want. So this one, let's say I'm just going to cut off maybe like right here and just grab just that stab. Cool sound. Maybe I want to bring it up or down an octave. Probably too low, but yeah, too low to go down. If we go up, we have another bass sound. So this is a really cool way of adding in another rhythm. So let's just chop that up. Let's just chop this here like this. And chop this like this, and then just duplicate that over like this. And now if I play this with the original bass line and my kick, let's listen to just what I've created here. It's pretty catchy already. So I literally just made a new bass line by resampling a bass line that already existed, opened it up a little bit, changed it. Now if I want, I can use this as like a bass stab, or I can use it as like a top layer. So I can grab an EQ, throw that on this new layer, and cut out all those the low end and the conflicting frequencies. Right, it still complements it. I'll pull that bass back down. Right, and now I have this new bassline top. Hear that little pop that's happening at the beginning right here? That's because I'm actually going in right from the cut here. It's not coming back down to that middle line, so I just have to go like this and fade it in. And if it's happening at the end, I just fade it out, and that'll get rid of that plop, that pop or click. It's happening on the other ones too, but I don't need to fix that. So it's a really cool way of adding extra layers to your bass line by just resampling a bass line that you already have. Another thing that I like to do with this is to add on delays or things like I have this effect called Tantra, which I can throw on here. And listen to how crazy this sounds. Record that. And now I have this section of bass that I can choose from. I get rid of Tantra. So let's grab a section of this. Let's just grab right here and right here. And now I can use this again as part of my bass line. Let's get rid of everything else. And let's just choose like this. Right, with the kick and the sub. Right, and that's just me grabbing something randomly. I'm not even choosing exactly where to grab. You can experiment with this and get really cool bass lines. I highly recommend it. I'll put a link to Tantra in the description below, and I'll put a link to a free version of an effect that's very similar to this. I can't remember the name. It's like FX, FC something. I'll put that in the description as well. Here's an example of something I recorded. Just gave it a little bit of swing. This is from the original, and I just kind of sliced it up. EQ'd the crap out of it and added that LFO as well. And added a weird kind of delay and reverb. And back with all these effects. Just like a nice little sprinkle of bass layer. The sub. Take that delay off. We definitely don't want that. Just using another preset. Nice strong bass, the MIDI. I've kind of been forgetting to show you guys the MIDI on this, but if you download the project file, obviously it'll be all there. Some heavy sidechain compression, obviously, on here. And then some tom layers. So the toms are really bassy, but they add a nice rhythm. I made sure they didn't overlap too much, and then I will usually go in with some sidechain compression and make sure that anything that's overlapping in the low end, one is sidechaining the other. So if the bass is playing and this tom comes in, it'll squish down the tom or it'll squish down the bass. I'm not going to go through each layer, but I do that quite a bit. A couple more layers here. I have a lot of layers. Another tom. The stems here. Another cool sound that I made, just like a little synth fill, speeding up the MIDI here and then adding some EQ automation on this filter, giving it that resonant sound, some different sounds that I've created, and some stems from the original. Some like whoms and background atmospheres and stuff. And down here, there's a couple synths. There's actually a few stems that I accidentally deleted, so they are gone, which is unfortunate. So these two right here, and then this acid synth, which was really cool because it was like this really percussive sound, like kind of how I had that effect in the last track on the drop with that kind of scrapey effect. I literally had this, and then I moved the project, and I lost it. So obviously, I won't be able to cover that, but let's move on to the drums next. For the drums, I'm not going to spend too much time again. I've covered drums so many times in my other How to Make Music Like videos and my other track breakdowns. I like using a shaker loop. My snare roll is something I wanted to cover because I did this really cool thing where I actually pitched the snare down like crazy. So I pitched it down 48 semitones and it sounds like this. Put the EQ on, some overdrive, auto pan and reverb, or EQ. And I made this really cool rhythm that's like a little bit less traditional. So if I put the pitch back up, and as it builds up, it's this weird like stuttery. And it's just different, just unique. And then yeah, that pitching it all the way down just sounds really cool. Just something unique that sounds different and interesting. By the way, if you want to learn how to make build-ups like this, you can watch my video that I explain how to make progressive house build-ups, and I'll put a link to that in the card right here. The last sounds here are these like weird synth percussion sounds that just add a little bit of ear candy once in a while to the track, and then this little build sound. So I actually took these sounds from this one. I made it like my own percussion. Up next, we have the synths. So the synths, I have this big atmosphere here. It comes from one of my sample packs on my Patreon. Adds a ton of glue to the track. These atmospheres are really great for just tying the whole track together, making it melodically feel glued and filling up a lot of the empty space. It also adds a bit of tension, which makes it feel a bit more energetic. I have Polyscape Nova, which I don't have on this computer. It's on my other computer, but it is a nice synth I've covered in the channel before, and then some recordings from different presets. So I will take a preset, I will record it with a ton of reverb and delay, and I will make my own atmospheres. And it just makes it so that the track is always moving, always progressing, and always has that nice ear candy that just makes it really beautiful and atmospheric. Then this is an original stem. I have a lot of reverb and a lot of EQ. The best part of the track, I think, overall, is definitely this build-up. So this build-up is full of tension. It's just constantly increasing that tension and that energy, making it a very memorable part of the track. I did this by just increasing all the high end, bringing in a lot of new effects and risers and things, and just really focusing on building that tension. And when it drops in, it feels very strong and just drops right to that nice groove. If you want to learn how to make buildups like in this track, then click this video right here. And if you want to learn how to make breakdowns like in this track, then click this video right here.